Well, hi, and welcome to the Christian Contrast, where we talk about how walking with Jesus leads us to live differently than those in the world around us. Now, for this episode, I want to talk about end of the world predictions, or Jesus coming back predictions. Some of you are probably aware of this, but there was a movement over the last month or so that there were some significant rapture predictions that happened. There was a guy named Joshua, I think it's pronounced Malakala, who I'm not sure if he's a pastor or a self-proclaimed prophet, but he predicted with absolute conviction and certainty that the rapture was going to happen, that the church was going to be raptured on September 23rd or 24th because of sort of the Jewish day where it begins and ends. There was a little bit of wiggle room. They got all excited about September 23rd and 24th. By the time that now this video is posted, that didn't happen. Afterwards, instead of coming out and saying, shoot, we were wrong, they basically said we got the math wrong a little bit. We recalibrated and tried to figure out something having to do with the Feast of Tabernacles and some math by different things. They said we recalibrated. It's going to be either on October 6th to 7th to 8th. It was sort of in that range somewhere is when it's going to happen. Didn't happen once again. And then for a third time, they said, now we're absolutely sure it's going to be between October 16th and 17th. And as I'm recording it, today is October 20th. So obviously that didn't happen either. Now here's what I want to say. Obviously, I'm just existing in a small space in the world, and a small space even within the Christian world. But one of the things that I was actually thankful about is I did not have people at our church constantly coming up and asking me about this. What do you think about this? And so that made me think. And I hope that this is the case, that believers in our circle were not swept up in this. We're not caught in this. We're not deceived by these false prophecies. There clearly were a bunch of Christians in the world who were. Hopefully fewer than in times past, because this is not the first time by far that there has been a prediction of this sort. And for the purposes of this video, I'm not even going to get into the specifics about the rapture, but just about the idea of the return of Jesus in some form. There have consistently been predictions about Jesus' return, whether it's for a rapture or just for a once and for all return. I remember back when the year 2000 was coming, there was a lot of concern about that. Maybe this is the end. Maybe Jesus is coming back. Back when I was very young, there was a book that was 88 Reasons Why Jesus is Coming Back in 1988. That obviously didn't happen. This goes back further and further and further. So here's actually what I want to do in this video. I felt like this was an occasion, because these things do happen. These predictions do happen. And on top of that, not only do these predictions happen, but I think as believers, we know, well, we are anticipating Jesus' return. We believe that he really is going to return, and we're excited about his return, and we want to be thinking about his return, and we want to be ready for his return. So is readiness just making sure we're trying to do the math right and get the prediction right and figure out exactly where we are in the scheme of all this? Or is being ready something else? So on the one hand, this is a podcast episode meant to warn about not getting caught up in false prophecies about the return of Jesus, or false predictions about the return of Jesus. But it's also an opportunity to say, okay, if that is not what watchfulness is, what is watchfulness? Appropriate, ready watchfulness for Jesus' return. And in order to do this, I want to go through an extended passage. I'll end up reading this whole passage, Matthew 24, not the whole chapter, but Matthew 24, starting in verse 36 and going all the way to verse 51. I'll read it in segments. But this is a passage that not only talks about predictions related to the return of Jesus, but gives us guidance on what it means to be ready for Jesus' return, of what it means to be watchful for Jesus' return. So here, I'll read the first part of this passage. This is Matthew chapter 24, verses 36 through 41, and then I'll give some comments on it. He says, this is Jesus speaking. He says, "But about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women grinding with a handmill, one will be taken and the other left. And as I mentioned, this video is not about getting into questions surrounding sort of, is there a rapture? If there is a rapture, when's that going to happen? I will just make a comment because sometimes in sort of popular quotes, those last 2 verses about one being taken and the other left are used to talk about the idea of a rapture. You know, 2 people are working next to each other. One's a believer, one's not. And so one is snatched away and the other is left there. Even a good chunk of people who believe that the church is going to be raptured say that's not what's being talked about here. That this is about the sort of judgment and cataclysm that will come upon that final judgment, upon the return of Jesus, and that one will survive it and the other will not survive it. But anyway, that's not even the main point of reading that passage. The main point of reading that passage, as you might guess, is that Jesus himself says, no one knows the date of the return. Let me even just read it again. About that day or hour, no one knows. And just to clarify, he says, not even the angels. And it seems like, man, the angels, that seems like a safe bet. If God wanted to tell the angels, this is the date of the return, angels are pretty faithful, seem pretty trustworthy. They don't even know. They're in the dark about it. In fact, he says, even the Son doesn't know the return. And there is a little bit of debate on this to say, well, does that just mean Jesus, when he took on flesh, was not aware of it during his earthly life? Does that mean something beyond this? I'm not going to get into that either. The main point is this. This is the best kept secret in the universe. When I heard that there had been a rapture prediction, a prediction about some form of Jesus' return on September 23rd and 24th, the one thing I absolutely knew for sure was that it wasn't going to happen on that day. I was like, I can guarantee you, whoever this person is, whatever math they did that they think they cracked some code in order to do this, they're not right. It's not going to happen. As confident as predictors can be about their prophecies about Jesus' return, believers can be absolutely ironclad confident that they don't know. Because Jesus said they don't know, and related it even to the days of Noah. And the main point of relating it to the days of Noah was this. It was like one day, everything seems normal, and the next day, the flood comes. He doesn't look at them and say, how did you not crack the code for all the signs that the flood was coming? One day, everything was normal and people were behaving as normal, and the next day, the flood came. No one knows the day. This is not something that we as Christians need to look at it and say, well, when there's a prediction, we need to use different discernment to try to figure out whether it's true or not. There are subjects that we need to practice that with. If we're reading a book that comes under a Christian label, or we're listening to a speaker who's claiming to speak for God in some way, there is a certain level of discernment where we need to listen and evaluate and hold it up against the Word of God and say, all right, is this somebody worth listening to? When it comes to predictions about rapture, about Jesus' return, or any of that, we don't even need to use discernment. We don't need to say, well, what's going on here? We can just say they are wrong. No one knows the day. It's hard to imagine Jesus being more clear than this. No one knows the day. He didn't say no one knows the day except Joshua Malakala. He's going to be able to crack the code. No one knows the day. But Jesus goes on, just because no one knows the day doesn't mean that we just sort of shrug our shoulders and ignore the reality of Jesus coming back. So listen to what he says next in the same passage in verses 42 through 44. Therefore, keep watch. So now here's the command. Keep watch, be awake, be aware, prepare yourselves, keep watch. Keep watch because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this. If the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. So a couple things about this. Famously here, Jesus uses the analogy of a thief, that his coming is like a thief. A thief doesn't make an appointment. A thief doesn't send you a message that has a code where if you're able to figure out and crack the code, then you'll know exactly when he's going to come. The thief comes suddenly, unexpectedly. And that's what we can expect from Jesus. The whole point of this idea is that you don't know. He says if the owner of the house had known when the thief was coming, he would have been adequately prepared for it. He would have made sure he was ready for it. But Jesus makes clear, once again here, he says, keep watch, not even though you don't know, but because you don't know. So whatever he's talking about with keeping watch here, he's talking about the idea of constant readiness. If Jesus told us exactly when he was coming back, and I'll choose something that's so far from now that it's not even relevant and nobody's going to pull this up as a prophecy. This isn't a prophecy. But let's say Jesus said, I am going to come back in the year 532,000 AD. And even if he gave a date, it was, my birthday, June 28th. And he said, that's when I'm going to come back. You wouldn't have to be watchful in that case. We'd be able to look at our lives today and say, well, he's not coming back now. So I don't need to be watchful. I don't need to be aware. I don't need to be wondering if he's going to come back. I know that it's not for a very long time, so there's no reason to be watchful. The reason to be watchful is not because you can figure it out. The reason to be watchful is precisely because you don't know when he's coming. It's funny because now, and I'll talk about this in a minute, now I'm a dad and I have kids, but still when I think about this idea of not knowing the time when Jesus is returning, I always think about when I was young, and I'm a middle child. I have an older sister and a younger brother. And there were some times when we got into sort of our teenage years where we were old enough that if my parents would go away for a weekend, they would just leave the three of us home alone. And we would, be able to prepare our own meals and take care of ourselves. And my sister had her driver's license and we were able to get places. And so we were taken care of and they'd just be gone for a couple days. All we knew was they were coming back on Sunday. And really the range was, we know it's probably going to be after church. So it's not going to be in the morning, but it could be at 1 p.m. or it could be at 9 or 10 p.m. And back in that time, we didn't have cell phones. And so they weren't texting us updates. We'll be home in 45 minutes. We just didn't know. Now, when my parents were gone, my brother and my sister and I, we did not throw parties. We did not trash the house, but things were not picked up. That there was a sense of just letting things go. But we knew the house had to be ready for when they returned. So once we got to Sunday, we made sure the house was ready for their return. And it was every dish that we used, all right, if you used another cup, just immediately wash that, put that in the dishwasher. If you accidentally got something on the floor, immediately sweep it up, just make sure it's ready because we don't know. If we did know, if they said we're coming back at 8:30, then we would have chilled and relaxed. We wouldn't have needed to be watchful. Because we don't know, that's the reason to be watchful. And I want to be really clear on that because even in the aftermath of some of the things that have been going on with these rapture predictions that have been happening, for some of the people who were buying into this or promoting this, when they've been called out or maybe even made fun of, and this is maybe another video, I don't think that it's wrong to have a little bit of making fun of the fact that somebody, even though Jesus said no one knows, was no, but I know. I've responded and have basically said hey, you shouldn't be making fun of us. You shouldn't be sort of poo-pooing this whole thing because these are just a bunch of people that were trying to follow Jesus' command to be watchful. I want to make this very clear. Jesus tells us to be watchful. He tells us to be on the alert. But clearly, whatever he means by this, it doesn't depend on us actually figuring out when he's going to return. The watchfulness is precisely because we don't know when he's going to return. So let me go on now and let me read the last part of what Jesus says in this passage. So these are verses 45 through 51. He says, "Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. And then he begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and in an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Some of you, even in that final verse about the punishment, you're like, wait, cut in pieces and then sat outside? And then just read this as there will be horrible consequences for somebody behaving in this way. Now, here's what Jesus is doing in this final part of the passage. He's already said nobody knows the date, and because nobody knows the date, you should be on your guard. You should be watchful. But now he describes what watchfulness is, and he describes it in terms of faithfulness. He says, all right, who's the faithful servant? Who's the one doing what God has called him to do? And he gives the analogy of a servant in the home, and the idea that while the master is gone, he's given instructions to his servants. He said, here's how you're to behave. Here's the work that you're to do. Here's the things that you're going to get done. Being a dad now, sometimes when my wife and I go out on a date, or if we're going away for a little bit more of a day, we'll say to the kids, like, hey, while we're gone, hey guys, the dishes need to be flipped. They need to be unloaded and then loaded. While we're gone, please do that. Sometimes we return and they haven't remembered to do it, and then we have to say, guys, all right, maybe now that you're even like, you already were getting ready for bed, or you thought you were done this, you still need to come and do it. Other times we come back, and to our delight, they did what we asked them to do while we were gone. This is the idea that Jesus is giving. Watchfulness, the kind of watchfulness that he's talking about, means we are being faithful to do what Jesus has told us to do while he's gone. This is not, the picture that he's painting is not the picture of somebody who's constantly like, is he back yet? Is he back yet? Is he back yet? Is he back yet? Oh, I was right. I was watching. The idea is that the master comes back and the servants are sort of like, oh, you're back. Well, we were just doing all the stuff that you asked us to do. It's the image actually of them being caught in the act of doing good. Which is one of the amazing things. When we think about, all right, what does it look like to live a watchful life while we anticipate the final triumphant return of Jesus Christ? When we think about what does it look like to be ready for this, really the main thing we can be thinking about is, what would I want to be caught doing when Jesus returned? And we've all had experience where we've been caught one way or the other. We've had experiences where somebody's walked in and caught us doing something that we were like, oh, like I wish I wasn't caught doing that, or I wish you didn't hear that, or I wish you didn't see that, or I wish you didn't notice that I'd done that, and that's no fun. That's really embarrassing. But we've also had times that we've been doing something and somebody's noticed it, and we didn't even know that we were being observed. We didn't even know that anybody was paying attention to us, but they were, and we sort of got caught in the act of doing good. And that's a beautiful thing, because you're doing this for the Lord. You're not doing this for the applause of others. But sometimes we've all probably had that experience where somebody says, hey, you probably didn't know that I was even watching this, but I noticed the way that you stopped and talked and prayed with that person who was struggling. Man, that was so wonderful. I was so blessed to see you do that. Like, hey, you probably didn't know that I noticed you doing this, but I saw that like you were walking down the road, or you were in a place, and maybe this would be a little bit more of a guy thing, and there were a bunch of girls that walked by and they were kind of provocatively dressed, and you just kind of turned your head the other way, and you just made sure to respectfully not sort of gawk at them. And man, I noticed that was wonderful. Way to go on that. There's this beautiful thing of being caught in the act of doing good. That's what it means to be watchful. And when Jesus comes back, he catches us doing exactly what he's called us to do. And so what is that? I'll tell you what it's not. It is not sitting around trying to crack a code of the timing of Jesus' return. Once again, for the umpteenth time, he has told us, you don't know, nobody knows, you can't figure it out. You do not know. So it's not trying to crack the code. It's when Jesus returns, if he finds us faithfully doing the work that he's called us to do. If he finds us faithfully sharing the gospel and being part of the gospel being proclaimed to the nations. If he finds us using our spiritual gifts within the church for the purposes of service and evangelism and discipleship and worship and all of those different things. If he finds us being faithful husbands and wives. If he finds us being diligent and attentive parents. If he finds us being a blessing within our work for the common grace of doing good to our neighbors. If he finds us doing those things, that will mean that we were watchful. And the whole idea behind this is not that we wait to a certain point that we think Jesus might be coming back, and then we start cleaning up our act, and then we start watching, and then we start behaving in a certain way. It's that we know it could be today, or it could be outside of my lifetime. So on the one hand, I'm living as if I'm ready. If Jesus were to come back today, I'd be excited that he came back today, and I would be, maybe proud is not the right word, but I would be at peace with what he finds me doing. But also that I'm living my life in a way that if he doesn't come back within my lifetime, I'm planning for a lifetime of faithfulness to him. Now, understand what I'm about to say in context. I don't know when Jesus returns. I would love for Jesus to return in my lifetime. I would love that. Every Christian who has lived in every generation has had the possibility that Jesus would return in their lifetime. And at least to this point, every one of them has ended up not having Jesus return within their lifetime. So Jesus may return within our lifetime, but we shouldn't bank on it. We're banking on the fact that he will return, and we're wanting to be ready for if he returns within our lifetime, that he will find us doing the sorts of things that will engender praise and reward for him instead of loss and disappointment and shame because of what we're doing. 100% we should be watchful. Don't be deceived into thinking that being watchful is trying to crack the code. People do frequently, because I'm a pastor, come up and say, do you think Jesus is coming back soon? And I feel like I'm the biggest wet blanket on this because I'm like, I don't know, maybe. Could be today, could be thousands of years from now. We don't know. There have always been signs of the time. There have always been reasons to believe. There are certainly reasons to believe now that we might be close to the time, but we're living in a way that we're ready for him to come back today. And we're living a life of faithfulness so that if he doesn't come back within our lifetimes, as has been the case with every Christian generation to this point, that we will have lived faithful lives, devoting ourselves to him in all that we do. So just once again, to put it out there, don't be taken in by predictions of Jesus' return. There will be more of them within your lifetime. Some of them will seem wacko and they'll be easy for you just to cast off. Some of them will seem more compelling. Do not believe any of them. Instead, live a life of consistent faithfulness so that when Jesus does come back, if he comes back within our lifetimes, we'll be caught in the act of being faithful to him. Well, it's entirely possible that some of you who are listening to this have thoughts or questions or feedback or want to know more about some of these things or want to know more a little bit about biblical prophecy and those things. If you do have feedback or comments, I'd be happy to engage with you on those. And so you can just leave those in the comments. The easiest way to listen to the episodes of the Christian Contrast is through our YouTube channel at Life Bible Fellowship Church, but we also have all of the episodes at our website at lbf.church. So if you go on the YouTube video and you leave a comment or a question, I'll look to go back and I'll look to engage with you on that because I'm always happy to do that. On top of that, we have a lot of back episodes of the Christian Contrast because we do episodes every 2 weeks, and we've been doing this for a few years. So if you find this content helpful, you can go back and you can find other videos that will help build you up in your faith. So until next time, thanks so much for taking the time to listen. We'll see you in 2 weeks with a brand new episode of the Christian Contrast.